I'm Kay, this is Frank. Good afternoon. You're listening to 1320 AM WCVG, The Voice. This is another episode of OKaye, Let's Be Frank, sponsored by Bill Ham and Liberty Mutual Insurance. No matter your insurance needs, home, auto, and life, Bill's got you covered. I am Frank, and this is Kay.
Hi, everybody.
Kay's back in the house.
Missed you last week.
Kay is back in the house.
Yes.
She decided to come join us today.
Yes.
She was bored and had nothing else to do, so she thought she'd just come and hang out.
Couldn't find a better offer.
Couldn't find a better offer this week. Couldn't find a better offer. We're happy to have you back, Kay.
It's good to be back.
Woo woo. My shirt matches your head.
Yeah? Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
That's what's up. We're actually all wearing blue. Hey, isn't that cool? So Jeff's wearing a blue. Yeah, we're all wearing blue. That's awesome.
It's pretty awesome.
Woot, woot. I know y'all didn't tune in to hear me sing. Sorry, that's just, it comes out. I can't help it. I had a whole choreographed thing to bust out into, but Drew was like totally against that. By the way, we have a great guest in the building today. Stay tuned to hear his insight on what we got going on. Kay asked a really cool question this week. What was your question this week, Kay, that you posted?
What does it mean to be like Jesus?
What does it mean to be like Jesus? That's a loaded question.
Yes, it is.
There's a lot to that.
What inspired that was Sunday, my niece in Texas.
Both of them?
My niece.
Your niece?
Not
Sorry.
my niece. My niece.
I'll be here all week.
In Texas. She got up and worshiped with her worship team.
Amen.
And it touched me to the core of who I am. And I cried, and I was full of pride, and I was full of just all these emotions, and I was like, you're so beautiful, and you've turned into such a beautiful woman that you're an inspiration. And she said, I hope I inspire you to be like Jesus.
Ooh.
And just like that, I thought, ooh, what do I need to do better? What do I need to do better? So what does it mean to be like Jesus, and what do we need to do better?
What does it mean to be like Jesus? That's so crazy. It's a good question. Because a lot of things, I woke up like super early, and a lot of things were on my mind about it, and just praying about it and going through it. What does it mean to be like Jesus? And that's why I did the video of like, well, I think to back all the way up, what does the word church or ministry or any of that even mean to people? Because to be like Jesus, I think people have a preconception of what Jesus is, but it's their own interpretation of what Jesus is. And especially, our show is kind of geared toward people that don't really know, or maybe don't go to church, or maybe don't follow, quote unquote, follow Christ, That's why we're real round relevant. And we like to just be honest and open about our feelings about how life goes and how God is in all that. So that's what kind of as I was thinking about your question, that's what kind of came to me. How do I feel about the word church? How do I feel about ministry? And what does all that even mean? You know what I mean? So to have that thought process, I think it's great, and I think it's a cool place to go. Our guest today can throw a lot of insight, and he's a lot smarter than all of us. Well, me anyway. So
Definitely me too, I'm sure. But I just think that for me to be able to follow his example is what we're supposed to do. But we get lost in the words of be like Jesus. I mean, I do. I really is like, that is a big concept. We should love one another. Okay, got that one. Check. You should be caring. Okay, I've got that one. Check. You know what I mean? But what does it really mean? Like, to the core. What does it really mean? And I was really hoping that we would have got some responses from my question, because I would like to know not just my opinion, not just your opinion, but what does it mean
Right.
to everybody.
Well, and that's another thing is it's such a touchy subject. A lot of people don't want to. I don't want to touch it. I don't want to talk about it. You're not supposed to talk about politics and religion. Blah blah blah. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing. And then the people that you contact for answers and things like that, I don't know. But according to Drew, like there was a couple. He didn't even see a post that I'd posted on Tuesday until this morning. So maybe a lot of people just didn't see it. The algorithm of Facebook and all that. It's a positive message, so they don't want to spread that too far.
Right.
But no, I'm curious. If anybody's out there, you can right now put the comments. Put it in the comments. We'll see them later, and we'll try to answer or talk the best we can then. But yeah, I think it's a great topic. I actually had a friend ask me a few days ago what they don't believe in God, and they were like, why do I have to give some person credit for me doing the things that I do? Was basic. And I was like, that's a fair question. I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, is if I'm the one getting up out of bed and I'm the one doing this, I'm the one doing that, why do I have to say God did it when I'm the one doing it? And it's a tough question to answer. It really is, because I know what I know. And if you grew up differently, this particular person, had there were issues in their child life. There were issues with the quote unquote church. You know what I mean? How they were treated in the church. So that's gonna skew views
Right.
all over the place. And I think it's cool that they ask me or talk to me about these things, but without knowing or without really dealing with why you think the way you think. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to just give an answer,
Mm-hmm. I know with me and my sister, we grew up with the same foundation for sure, but she had more church and more quote unquote religion, whatever, because she had my grandma and my mom was like the TBN queens. So that was like constantly on the TV. And she was in church more than I was, you know what I mean? And then she spent her 14 years where she spent it. And I don't know if she depended on God the whole time she was there, but I know like now she's got tattoos all over her that are scriptures. Those particular scriptures aren't just scriptures that she chose out of the Bible. They were the ones that she held on to keep her going through her 14-year stint. That's what kept her together.
Right.
And so I've got this life that I lived walking away from being Jesus-like, for sure. There's a lot of years in my life that I didn't follow the ways that was supposed to be followed. I wasn't like Jesus. But I've known my whole life.
Well, and this is kind of where my mind takes me, is that, you were like Jesus. Because there's a point, if we believe what the Bible says, Jesus walked the earth as a human so he could experience everything that we experience. So when you're experiencing whatever, mm-hmm. you're like Jesus at that moment. There was a portion of his life that he experienced and went through what you're going through. That's a truth that I believe. I think that's why he had to come in human form. You know what I mean? So that's why it can reach everybody.
Right.
That's the thing to me that can take someone who hasn't been to church, who doesn't read the Bible and blah, 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 into an understanding of this person knows you. Mm-hmm. This person has experienced what you're talking about, what you're thinking about. But I think what you're saying, like, that's kind of the whole shebang. Everybody feels that, well, no, Jesus don't know me. He don't know what I've been through. You know what I mean? I didn't follow him. I didn't do, you know what I mean?
Well,
blah, blah, blah. I just think that's the majority of people's thoughts.
Right. And not that I didn't do what he said to do. I didn't go to church and do what church said to do. But I know good and well, there's no doubt in my mind at all that he's been with me every single day for 46 years. Period. No doubt in my mind. Because I can look back on the stupid stuff I did. And if it weren't for the fact that he was there, I wouldn't be here today. I have overcome a lot of things only because Christ was there. Period. But am I being like Jesus? I still don't know.
What's that mean?
What
What's
does
that
it
mean? So while we don't know, I don't know, but there's somebody here who
Might know.
might know. Oh man, we welcome. This is our good friend Drew Inskeep. He's the pastor at New Reality Church. He's a great guy. Manager at Uncle Leroy's. Uncle Leroy's. In the Ark and Creation Museum. And yes, he is the app champion. Without further ado, this is Drew Inskeep.
The app that does not exist.
Drew Inskeep. Yay. Drew Inskeep. Yay.
It's nice to have you, Drew.
He needs to get more people that are willing to come so you don't have to keep having me show up. You need more guests. Every time you introduce me, I feel like there should be a round of applause.
There is. It's just we can't hear it
Okay.
Yeah.
because it's out there.
You make it sound like a way bigger deal than it is.
It's a huge deal, Drew.
So, am I just solving all the problems? Is that what I'm doing?
I mean, that takes me off the hook.
Give some
You know what I
insight.
mean? So
Don't
Well-
solve the problems,
well-
just give some insight.
If you're needing insight,
Solve
I do
the
have a
problems.
smartphone right here. Give me 1 second. No. Yeah. So when I saw the question, what does it mean to be like Jesus? The very first word that popped in my head was compassion. There's a lot in Scripture about the compassion of Christ, and it's just an emotion that's very deep. Like we can say I care about something without it going too deep. It might mean something. Like I can care about a sports team, but at the end of the day, if they win or lose, my life's no different because of it, But to have compassion on someone or something takes it to a much deeper, more personal level, which is where Jesus was when he was on earth. He had compassion for those around him. That's the first thing I think about. That's always the first word that comes to mind is compassion. And then as I just kind of started thinking out loud, I was thinking things like he humbled himself, he was obedient to the Father, he sacrificed for us. There's just all these adjectives that just start flowing out when you start thinking about who Jesus is today, who he was on earth. But I think ultimately, how do I know if I'm being like Jesus? To me, is what I'm doing, what I'm saying, how I'm being, does it point back to the Father? Because everything Jesus did pointed back to the Father. That's why he was here. Not my will, but yours be done. So with every decision we make and everything that we say to people, every act that we do in our life, are we pointing back to the Father? Because to me, if I'm pointing back to God, then I am being like Christ. Because that's everything he did. He pointed everything back to the Father. So that's kind of my nutshell answer, I guess.
answer in a nutshell, Drew Inskeep.
And I'm out.
That's the next hour. Awesome. No, that makes total sense. This was one of the things that I wrote down was to not think about what I want or to not be motivated by what I want. That's what it means to be Christ-like, and that's why it's so hard to separate who I am versus who's in me. But when I think about your word compassion, I think that's totally true, but we have to understand the total meaning of compassion. Compassion doesn't necessarily mean smiles in your face. Compassion doesn't necessarily mean giving you what you want.
Right.
Compassion means that I care for you. But true caring, I've read so many things about how, quote unquote, soft the world's getting and things like that. Compassion, I think we talked about it a little bit last week, about like my grandfather. He wasn't what you would call the typical compassionate person. You know what I mean? You didn't come in and give him a hug. You didn't, sit down and talk about your day with Frank. You know what I mean? It just didn't happen that way. But there was a time to where I was not really in trouble, but really down. And I came in, and Granny wasn't there. Um, Granny was always the go-to. Granny's always the go-to. It was just Frank was there, and I come in, and uh, he could tell. He didn't really say much. He just said, "Are you hungry?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So he fixes a couple of eggs and a piece of toast. That was Frank making breakfast, But we sat down at the table, and we kind of hashed it out a little bit. He told me about myself, in no uncertain terms. Um, but that whole act of him taking time out of his day to do something, regardless of how harsh he came across, regardless of how little I ate or whatever, it was compassion. And so as I was reading this this morning, there are things that Jesus did that didn't really come across as compassionate to some people. There were some truths that he had to tell people that those people that were being told wouldn't understand as him being a compassionate person. We love the whole story, the obedience and the died on the cross and walking in love. We love that narrative, and that is the narrative. But there's also the part to where he told people about themselves and about how they need to change the way that they're doing things, and they didn't like it. Did that mean he's not compassionate?
No.
Absolutely not. So when we think about being Christ-like, what does it mean to be Christ-like? That's a lot. There is a lot. I think about typical Baptist, and before anybody says anything, I grew up Baptist, so I get it. But Daddy was a preacher, a Baptist preacher, and he preached a lot of hellfire brimstone sermons. You know what I mean? And almost put the fear of God, pun intended, in you. You know what I mean? And so there was a little bit of fear. Fear God. That was preached. You know what I mean? Jesus preached that, taught that. Sorry, Jesus taught that. That was part of the things that he taught. Does that mean he's compassionate? Absolutely. So there's fear, there's a little bit of anger when the Bible talks about him going into the temple and flipping tables and how mad he was about how people were acting. Is he still compassionate? Absolutely. So these types of things, I want to try to paint a whole picture when we talk about that question. I want to paint a whole picture because it is so inclusive. The Bible is very inclusive. Mm-hmm. We and the enemy want to separate us from the word by saying the things of like just obedience, just love, just, and pretend that you're not allowed to have feelings and you're not allowed to do things or whatever. The Bible's inclusive. Being Christ-like is an inclusive term. I think we just have to change our perception of how we look at that term. So that brings me to my next point. To be Christ-like, what that kind of looks like is being prepared to be perceived based off human perspective, not by truth. So Jesus, again, walked the earth, and there were people who didn't like him, yes?
Yes.
Obviously, they hung him from a tree. So there were people who didn't like him. Human perspective. Jesus was perceived based off human perspective. So this guy who was walking around only to be a sacrifice, only trying to preach love, only trying to point you to the thing that can save your soul, was crucified based off a human perspective. They thought he was trying to take over. They thought he was loud and obnoxious. Do we look at people and think that?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple people I can think of. I'm one of them.
Well, no.
Hey, proof's in the pudding. And again, so to be Christ-like, I have to be prepared to be perceived
Right.
on human perspective. I have to be okay with somebody saying, dude, you're too much. Bro, chill out. You're too much. Okay, I get that. For you. But that doesn't take me out of the category of being God's child. That doesn't take me out of the category of being a representative of Christ. Because a human perceived me a certain type of way.
I see.
So,
I think that's sorry. I just think that's a big thing, what you just said, being God's child. I think the first step we have to do to be Christ-like is understand that we are God's children. If we don't understand that, we'll never be able to be Christ-like. Right? I mean, we look at it in our perspective of, oh, I've got my mom and I've got my dad and this is who I'm born to and this is my family, and we let that rule who we are, unless we take it into consideration that God created us to be his children. So if we can't be his child, we can't be Christ-like. You have to learn that. Like, it's just a big thing.
well,
So-
I think you're absolutely right. And that's kind of what I want to go. I got to preface this by saying I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was like, we need to teach people how to lean not into their own understanding. And they're like, well, you got to show them more than that. And I'm like, I don't think so yet. I think that you have to teach somebody how not to lean into their own understanding if you want them to get a clear picture of what God does. If you say lean not into your own understanding and move on to the next thing, then pretty much everything you said prior to that, I don't understand.
Right.
How do I move on with that? How do I live in not understanding what's going on? So to be like, you got to be God's child. What does that mean? I think I've messed up too much to be God's child. God doesn't look at me the same way he looks at you. I mean, imagine saying this to somebody. If we're out on the street and you say, you got to realize that you're God's child. And they're like, I've already messed up too much to be God's child. I can't be God's child. He's not looking at me the same way he's looking at you. Drew, what would you say to that?
I just feel like I feel like you and I have talked about what I'm about to say before, but I think when it comes to that kind of thing, you have to know where they're coming from. Like what barriers are already in their heart and mind about God, or their perception of what God will feel toward them. Like I can say the stuff, I can give the verses, but if I don't know where they're coming from to know how to relate to, okay, this is where they're struggling, let me show them how God can help through that thing they relate to. Like, I think that's important, that why do you feel that way? Why do you feel that God can't love you? And let them, because if you let people explain and just listen to what they have to say, you'll pick up on things and you'll understand where they're coming from, to where you can say, I get what you've gone through, but let me show you something from his word about something you just said. And you don't know what that's going to be until they say it. So you can't go in with here's my 3 points and my story at the end. You have to go in saying, all right, Lord, lead the conversation, and when there's something revealed, help me know where to go so that I can get them to where you want them to be. So yeah, your stuff and the things you want to talk about, but you've got to know where they're coming from to be able to reach them where they are.
I think in that, listening to their story and really paying attention and listening to their story, you will be able to see where God did intervene, where he was there, where he did show love. And in that, they may not can see that in their moment of whatever they're going through. They may not can see that God was there. But if you are compassionate enough to listen to their story, then he's going to say, this is where I was at.
Right.
And then that will give you, look, dude, right here shows that he loved you, because you come through this. This is what you come through. It could have been a whole different scenario. I mean, I know that's the way I see it in my life. And in that is where, after after that point is where you can say, you know, this is where he walked me through too. And show the comparisons of not your life, but of how God walked with you through those things and how much he loved you doing so.
Right.
I try to think about like where I was at, and I have the luxury of knowing Christ and having known Christ pretty much all my life, and that's a place that's difficult to talk to a non-believer from, and to really understand your audience. And I think you're spot on, Drew. I think that it is so. We have to change our perspective. I mean, like this, it's a reason why that theme keeps coming up in life, especially on this show. I have to remember that my perspective is one of growing up in a household with a preacher and living and seeing those types of things. Somebody that I'm talking to, their perspective is probably not that. It's probably one of disappointment and hurt and beat up by life and all those different types of things. So until I understand that, until I get that, until I hear that, to be Christ-like, for me to understand what that means, I have to stay in constant communication with the Father, because of what you're saying. If I open myself, okay, I want to take myself out of me. I want to just be available for whatever this person has to say. My next words have to be, God, use me for your will. Speak to this person through me. I don't know what's coming. I don't know why. You're going to have to take this because I don't know why. And usually, just like Drew said, usually let the person talk. And then if you really open yourself up, God will use that whole moment in ways that you don't even understand. And that's why Brother Zippy, you know, he's coming on in a couple weeks, and being out in Arizona and doing street ministry and stuff like that, he's seen a lot of things. He chose to open himself up to whatever God wanted to have happen. What did Mike Tyson say? Everybody's got a plan until you get hit in the face, right? You got a plan as a Christian. We have a plan of what we want to say and how we want to say it and how we're going to preach and how we're going to, you know what I mean? We were talking about Bible study and stuff, and just planning how you go about planning a Bible study or a sermon or any of that. You know, you get up in front of people and somebody throws you a curveball or whatever. Well, if you're only stuck on your plan and what you want to say, then nobody's getting taught right then. That's an awkward moment of silence because that didn't have anything to do with what I wanted. But when you get up in front of people or in front of one person, and you are engaged with God, you're just open and available, then God will use that moment. And it's funny because that plays into one of my points that I had written down, making sure that there's a difference, what it means to be Christ-like. Making sure that there's a difference between being understood and God being understood through you. I just got chills. That's deep.
That is deep.
I have to make sure that I'm not the one that's being understood. Have to make sure. God gave me a certain prowess, I guess, to be able to speak in a certain manner and put my hands a certain way and act a certain way, whatever. But if that's all I'm concerned about, they're seeing Frank, not God. Drew gets up and preaches in front of people on a pretty regular basis and has for years. The reason Drew comes on the show and the reason that we're friends is because pretty much every time that he gets up there, he just makes himself available to what God has to say to the people he's in front of. You know what I mean? To what I watched my daddy do. That's why I learned that it's not necessarily, it's not ever the person that's in front of you. It's never about the person. Thank goodness for these people. Thank goodness for the Stephen Furticks and the Joyce Myers and the T.D. Jakes and all that, to have a platform to spread God's word in a mass quantity to mass people. But it's never about T.D. Jakes. It's never about Joyce Meyer. It's about God. And if we really listen to these people, The majority of these people that you're going to see. Now, let me preface this by saying there's some idiots out there, and I apologize for them. There are some idiots that get up and pretend that whatever. But when somebody gets up and all they talk about is God and wanting you to get closer to Him, by not even necessarily listening to them, they just care about you getting closer to Him. That's huge. That is huge, and that's our job. So through the Bible, through us talking about what compassion looks like and what Jesus taught, what the Holy Spirit teaches us, and all of that, we have to make sure that even though we will be perceived by a humanistic perspective, I have to make sure that I'm not understood. And that's hard. That's hard because we got to get that. We're going to be perceived from a human perspective, but I am not to be understood for me. God is supposed to be understood through me. And I think that's to get more Christ-like. That was Jesus. That's what Jesus, when He walked the earth. Don't look at me. I'm about my Father's business. Said that when he was 13, when he got left, right?
Right.
I'm about my Father's business. You ever seen that meme where it's like a little baby and they're on the in the bathtub, and it's Jesus and Mary, right? Jesus is standing on top of the bath water. She's like, "Get in it now!" He's just standing there with his arms standing on water. He's ain't got time for this, Jesus. But no, anything that He did, we laugh about that, but that Jesus wasn't here for a show.
Right.
He wasn't here for any of that. He was totally about His Father's business. So to be Christ-like, I have to be about my Father's business always. I can't be understood. Don't worry about understanding Frank. I do want you to understand what God has done in my life, because He's the only reason that I sit here. I do want you to understand what I've seen Him do in other people's lives. I do want you to understand my story, because it's all Him. You know what I mean? But that's not, don't worry about understanding Frank. You need to understand what God's doing. Hopefully, if you see that in me, then you can look at yourself and see, oh, well, God's done that in my life too.
Right.
Wow, God did that. Wow, that was God. Looking back, oh my goodness. It's crazy when you start to think about that. The scripture that I'm going to look up, I don't know where it's at, because it was funny that it came up because it was something that I've never really read or really heard. It's not really taught that often, but it was Micah 5:13. So this is the King James version. I should have brought my NIV, but
Hang on, I'll get it for you. Micah 5:13.
yeah, Micah 5:13. Because it made real sense when I looked it up. It was the same thing on my phone. I had to switch it from King James to NIV so I could read it. But thy graven images also will I cut. Anyway, but this is a good representation of what I think being Christ-like. Just kind of one of the things that God said through this guy.
I gotta sneeze, sorry.
The basic thing about what he was saying.
I have the NLT version instead of the NIV.
That works. Basically, I will destroy all your idols, your sacred pillars, so you will never again worship the work of your own hands. When that popped in my mind, as I was praying this morning, does God not do that? Does that not happen? When we go out and we build up the life we think we're supposed to have, and I want you to understand me. I want you to see how hard I'm working. Look at this car. I want you to see how much money I got. Look at my house. I want to have people over so I can hear the good things that you say about me. I want to be able to entertain. God says He will destroy all the idols. Those are idols. When I want people to hear me, those are idols. Well, I talk about a lot on here. The nouns. People, places, and things. When those get put above God in my life, they're idols. And it doesn't matter. The Bible even says your parents, your spouse, your kids, when those get put above God, they're idols. That's the truth. Now, it was said that Jesus taught these things when you put your parents and you put your spouse and you put your children above God. Does that sound very compassionate? Do you think that there were people in that crowd that didn't want to hear that? What do you mean? What do you mean? My kids are the most important thing to me. I would die for my kids. Would you live for them? What's that mean? What's that mean? Would you live for your kids? Would you live for your spouse? Well, what does that mean? That means that I can't put anything else above God because God takes care of all of us. He's the only reason that we're here. And he would do that. He would destroy these things so we would never again worship the work of our own hands. It's not the fact that we're not supposed to have nice things.
Right.
To be Christ-like is to give all glory to the Father, the one who gives us these nice things. That's what it's about.
Being content with the things that he gives you, I think, is a big thing. Like, don't pursue, so I'm not saying don't pursue greater things, but don't pursue greater things that are above what he wants for you. Be content with what he's given you.
But when he says, I'll give you the desires of your heart, it doesn't mean that he's going to give you he's going to give you the things to desire. He's going to put
Right.
the things that you should desire. And one of those things is not the work of your own hands.
Right.
Drew, what do you think about this?
I've been taking mental notes, but you ranted so long I've lost most of them. So, like, I'm currently just sitting at that part where I realized I need to stop having people over just so they'd see my new windows from LEI. You know, like I can't have that idle in my.
I brought the contract, by the way.
No, there's just a lot. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. To quote an unnamed man, for sure. I agree with it all, for sure. But, you know, when you talk about compassion, you talk about listening to people, not caring if you're understood because you want the Father to be heard, glorified, all those things. I think that when you talk about compassion isn't just caring. So to kind of like bring it back, I think it was, I want to say it's in Matthew, I don't remember, but when it talked about Jesus looking out and seeing the people as a sheep with no shepherd, and that's when he had compassion in his heart for them. It's to see the need in someone else's life and for that to genuinely affect you. I want to say it's Lamentations, just because it's random enough that Lamentations sounds like the right book. But there's a verse that says, my eye affects my heart. And there's a lot of people who walk around and their eyes nothing affects them. Mm-hmm. Because it's not part of what I'm planning, what I'm doing, or getting me where I'm going, so I don't care. Mm-hmm. But if we look around with the eyes of Jesus, it will affect our heart. And there will be compassion, because that definition, I remember studying that one time, and the definition there of Jesus' compassion was like a deep yearning and longing in his heart. So there was this intense emotional feeling that these people need help. And he knew, and I'm sure part of that entire emotion was knowing the help they need is why I'm here. And I know that day is on its way. And there's no way to separate that. He knew his whole time that's why he was here. So seeing the sheep with no shepherd and knowing that's where he was headed, it wasn't, let's get this over with. Can we just be done already? It was, this is why the Father has me here. They need me. They need that forgiveness. They need that freedom, and that only I can give through my work on the cross and the resurrection. So it is a deep emotion. It is something, to me, it's something that affects you enough that you're willing to put action to it. It's not just, I'm not trying to be like weird or anything, but we see the sad puppies on the commercials, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And you go, oh, poor puppy. You're not picking up your phone and calling the number. You're not giving them your credit card information. The next commercial comes on, you move on with your life. You think, oh, that's sad, but you're not going to do anything about it. Having compassion for people is realizing something. It might be sad, it might be hard, but now I'm going to change what I'm doing to help that person and to shine the light of Jesus into their life where no one else has been willing to do it. And that's where you hear a lot of church. It gets messy. It's not meant to be, I guess it's kind of bringing your two different questions together. Church isn't meant to be this squeaky clean political faces and smiles and handshakes, and it's not meant to be that. It's meant to be messy people with lots of problems finding other people that can, keep them accountable, help them along their way while pointing them to Jesus. So it just kind of brings it all together, but I think that I care to the point that I'm willing to see what's around me, let it affect me, want to make a difference, let him make that difference through my life. All of that requires my agenda for today doesn't have to be the only thing that happens. Like, we all have responsibilities. You make appointments. I have 3 different stores I go to. There are things I have to accomplish. There are things I have to get done. But it's really, really easy, especially the busier you are, to let that be the only thing you think about. Mm-hmm. And there's missed opportunities, and there's people hurting. Like last week, I won't say anything specific, but there were, 3 or 4 specific people, instances in my world that were just rough. It was not good. Life, and I told my boss, I said, it's days like this, it's moments like this that help me remember there's such a bigger perspective on why we're here. Because it's easy to think sales, it's easy to think keeping it all together, getting all the stores staffed, getting them all their supplies, because that's my job. But I can't ever forget that is a factor within the life that God's given me to point people to him. And so seeing the need and then saying I'm willing to help meet the need, or seeing someone who's down and saying I'm willing to get down with them and help them up. I want to get myself dirty in the process if I have to, because I care enough to try to make a difference and point that person back to Christ. And so that, kind of like with what you're saying, that kind of gets away from the glorified, shiny, just love everybody. Like you said, we are supposed to love everybody. But sometimes loving everybody will bring us things we may not want to deal with. It may hurt, it may bring us pain or whatever, but that's what it means. It's being able to do all those things, not just when it's convenient or when it's in front of other people to be noticed, but just because this is who you want to be as a person, to be more like him.
Absolutely. That's what I was trying to find is the scripture that's in Matthew talks about, God knows your heart. Two people the only 2 people in the world that know exactly what goes on in your mind and in your heart is you and Jesus. So when we talk about compassion, when we talk about these different things, again, the perception from other people doesn't really matter.
I think too of the verse where Jesus says, they're going to hate you, they're going to persecute you, they're going to disagree with you, but remember, it's not you, it's me. They don't reject you, they don't reject your message, they reject me. So that comes back into that whole, who cares if you're understood? Because if you're not about your message, you're about his message. When people attack you or verbally whatever, it's not you. You didn't make them mad, his word did. Or that conviction they don't like that they're feeling. So that's where, if we're gonna really be a light and be a witness, when that happens, we just look at that and say, it's not my word you're upset with, and I'm not gonna let that stop. Well, I'm gonna go mope my way back home, sit on the couch and eat chocolate and feel sorry for myself. But hey, he told us, they're going to reject you, but they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me.
Right.
And it's kind of like, just keep on keeping on, Just
keep on keeping on.
There's someone else waiting for the answer.
Right.
Keep going.
Absolutely. I don't know, there's so much with that. When your heart's genuine and you genuinely want to help people, I think where it comes into question is when people are only if when people only understand human perspective and they want to do something good, then is that good coming from somewhere other than you wanting to look good? You see what I mean? There's some people that will go out and try to, I want to get this particular job. It used to, was it P&G? P&G is a big company around here. You know what I mean? You work at P&G, people love to throw that around. It's so funny listening to people talk. I was thinking about this guy I used to work with, John Calipari. You know who he is? Of course you do. He's the basketball coach for Kentucky. When he first got hired as the coach, he came into Owensboro Sports Center. Owensboro's a big sports town and blah, blah, blah. And he had met with a few people that day or whatever. Went and had lunch. Well, I remember walking through the shop when I was working at Steve Jones Chrysler, and I heard this guy, and he was rattling off. Oh yeah, I hung out with OKaye, is what he called him. Hung out with OKaye. We had lunch. You know what I mean? And just that thing of I want to let you know that I met somebody important, and now that I feel important now, I'm somebody because I was with somebody. So he was wanting everybody within earshot to know that he was somebody now, right? Which is the majority of humans. I want to be somebody, I want to. But when it pertains to the question of what's it mean to be Christ-like, I want you to know whose I am. Mm-hmm. I don't want you to know that I had lunch with Cal.
Right.
I'll tell you that Cal was in town. Cal was here. Cal did this at UMass. Cal did this when he was in the NBA for a minute. Coach Cal did a lot of great things. He's helped so many young people achieve their dreams. He started foundations. He's done fundraisers. He's raised a lot of money for cities and for families. It's a totally different conversation, right? And I think that that's kind of what it means to be Christ-like. Am I telling you that I had lunch with Coach Cal, or am I telling you what Coach Cal has done in his tenure? You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think to kind of switch the perception of me being understood as opposed to God being understood through me, I think that's where we begin the shift of becoming Christ-like, if that makes sense.
I've had lunch with Frank, so I'm just throw that out there. Well, and really,
I'm still nobody. So.
If you're being like Jesus, the conversation would be more like, I had lunch with some outcasts. I had a conversation with a prostitute today, pointed her to the Father. That's Jesus. Jesus, the only time you find him hanging out in the temple, he's throwing tables.
Right.
So,
right.
that's who he was. You want to be like Jesus, reach those that are down and out.
Well, I mean, and his whole thing was he didn't tell anybody. And even when it was so funny, when you read these stories, he didn't go back and tell the disciples, hey, I hung out with this lady at the well. Hey, I didn't, you know what I mean? Or I went and hung out with this blind man at the pool. Or, hey, I just turned this water into wine. He didn't tell these stories. When the disciples asked, it kind of perturbed him a little bit. And he's like, you're never going to get it, are you? Mm-hmm. I'll tell you again about who my dad is. Yeah. He never really spoke about what he was doing. His whole thing was, every conversation was pointing it back to his father, I watched a video the other day about him turning water into wine and what it meant. And the video was on kind of another topic, but he brought up just a cool thing of when Jesus said, it's not yet my time, woman. Did he put it like that? It's not my time yet, woman.
I actually had that question too this week. Why was it so important for Jesus to obey his mother and turn the water into wine when it was not yet his time? But he still done what he was supposed to do because she told him to do so. You know what I mean? But why was that important? Because isn't it in the commandments to honor your father and mother? Mm-hmm. So as he was doing as his mother asked him to do, knowing that it wasn't his time, and she knew that it wasn't his time, but he was doing that to honor his mother. So he don't do things for himself. Everything he did was to honor his father, you know, to honor his mother. By honoring his mother, he honored his father because he held that commandment. So, yeah. Sorry, Frank, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I forgot. Anyway,
It's not yet my time.
it's not yet my time, woman.
I don't know where you were going, but that's what you said. So I'll leave the rest to you.
Now, when he was saying like it's not yet my time, we put so much emphasis, and even this video the emphasis was putting on him turning water into wine because it had to do with drinking alcohol and all this much stuff. And I think to the point of God is in the interruptions. The whole the wedding thing and being at that venue with those people, I think goes back to your point, Drew. I think that was the thing. Him being there with those people and them enjoying themselves, drinking wine, that's the story. Not really. I mean, it's a great miracle, you know, like turning water into wine, of course. But who he was with, who he was telling the stories to, who, like I was saying in the beginning, I think that has more to do with inclusion than anything else. That everybody is included. These stories pertain to you, they pertain to everybody. The perception of what being Christ-like means is not exclusive. It's inclusive. And I think that if we don't take anything else away from that's what we have to understand, is that to be Christ-like, have compassion, have a different perspective, and to not worry about being understood. And don't be motivated by what I want.
Right.
My motivation should be what the Father wants. And that's, I think, is what Mary, Jesus' mom, was getting at with go ahead and do this for us. Motivation is not for you think it's time. He knew what his mission was. I don't know, it's hard to really understand what he was thinking in that moment. If he was thinking my only mission is to be crucified and I'm supposed to teach along the way, then, his mom kind of snapped it back into kind of reality, like you're going to have to do these things so that people believe what you're saying. Could be. I don't know. Wasn't there. But what just hits me is the inclusion of all of it. The people that he taught, the people that he walked around, the people that he worshiped with, all of that. His perspective was one of truth and not himself being understood, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, just in him choosing the disciples alone, he chose somebody from every walk of life. You know what I mean? He chose the tax collector, he chose the fisherman, he chose the architect, he chose somebody from every walk to say, all of us are a part of the plan. We are a part of what he was sent here for. It doesn't matter who you are or what you do. He was sent here for you to be with him in heaven. For us, those that claim to be Christian, and I just say that claim to be Christian because, we can claim something, but if we don't actually walk the walk, and if we don't understand that Jesus was here for all of us, then we're not going to be Jesus-like. Because to me, if I don't understand that he died just as much for Frank and his messed up stuff as he did for me and my messed up stuff, or you can look at, say, a homeless man. I've got a perfect person involved anyway. So you have this scenario of being homeless and thinking that they're doing what they're supposed to do for their own good. and praying the whole time that Jesus blesses them, not really seeing that Jesus has blessed them every day just by being able to get up and do the next thing, you know. We get stuck in our own heads, our own perspectives, as you said, and we don't know how to step out of that because we want to be known. We want to leave a legacy, you know. But whose legacy are you leaving? That's the question. Because as far as I'm concerned, for me, myself, I don't want a legacy left as long as Casting Crowns says, only Jesus, you know. As long as you can look back on my life and say, yeah, you know, Kay did the best of her ability to be as Christ-like as she could and fought to be there even more. That's not me. That's him in me. So it's not my legacy, it's his.
Can't put a limit on my ability if I'm letting him do it.
Right.
Because ability is endless. He gives me the ability. That's deep. That's another episode. We'll talk about that next week.
You missed your chance to break out the song too.
I don't remember the ability.
Only
I don't want
Jesus.
to leave a legacy. I was thinking about that, but there's a wholly different story that you may not know about. I heard that song for, what was it, like a week? A week straight? I
Yeah.
called you like every day. It's a whole nother, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, because every time, like, hey, can you come get my wallet? Whatever. Anyway. So the end of the show, Drew Inskeep, Pastor Drew Inskeep, thank you for coming on and being with us and giving us some insight on how to be Christ-like. We have gotten to this point today where God gets to summarize his show today. We always let our guests spin the wheel that has different scriptures on it that change weekly. So without further ado, Drew, let's
Be will.
be real.
Don't spin it so hard that it takes 20 minutes.
I mean, you can. It's fine.
So how many times do I have to show up before I'm not a guest anymore?
I don't know. We'll talk
What do
about
we
that.
got? We got.
612.
Look, Drew.
Drew, don't
Don't
touch
touch
it.
it.
What are you
I
doing?
didn't touch it. That's right where it was.
Right, where was that?
Both
Romans
times I did.
8:28.
So you spun it when you first got in here, and that's
it
where
landed
that's
there.
where it landed.
And I just did it now.
Hmm.
And
And so you see, this is what God does when he wants to do something. That's just what it's going to be.
Remember, that's when we picked last week.
Is
To
it-
put on the.
That is the one we put on that last week.
Yes.
Because Tina wrote it.
Yes.
Dun,
Oh well,
dun, dun.
that's why I don't have a card for it. Either.
Sorry. Yeah.
Got you.
Forgot. Yeah, we just made it
And
up.
we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purpose.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
Called according to whose purpose?
His
Yes.
purpose.
So I should probably not think about what I want or be motivated by what I want.
Right.
Should probably think about his purpose because that's
Why
what
we're here.
that's what we're called to do.
Learn to understand what our free will is and what God's will is, what God's will is, and let go of our will.
Ooh.
There's another deep subject.
That's gonna be hard. That's
What
gonna be
is
hard.
deep?
But I've worked so hard to get myself here, and I've pulled myself out of craziness, and I'm right where I want to be in
But
life.
did you really do that?
Yes, I got up and I worked. I worked hard every day, and I took 2 buses, and I did all this. I did that.
On your own strength. I mean, I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, like that's what people think, though. That's
I know
what,
it is what they think, and I have to say that no, you didn't do this. God did this with you. You didn't do this because He's the one that gave you that strength to come through that. You have to learn how to let go of your free will and understand.
Let go of those idols,
That's right.
because God will destroy them. For we should not worship the work of our hands. Micah 5:13. Dun, dun, dun. Crazy. It's crazy how this stuff happens, right?
It's a beautiful.
I love it. I love it. Lean not into your own understanding. Whoop, whoop. Man, that's so awesome. Drew, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me back.
Thank you so much. As our special guest,
Yes.
the Drew's the app champion. If you didn't know, stay tuned. We'll fill you in on as far as what that means at a later date. But
Once we figure it out, we'll let you know.
once we figure it out, we'll let you know. Pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. Just want to thank everybody who watches and listens. We thank all of our sponsors and the people we sponsor and things like that. Bill Ham, Liberty Mutual Insurance, Home Auto Life. No matter your insurance needs, Bill has you covered. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be back next week. Zippy Durkus will be back on the show in 2 weeks. Just got a lot coming up. Thank you. Big thank you to everyone. Tune in next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. 1320 AM WCVG The Voice. This has been another episode of OKaye. Let's be frank.
Bye.
Bye. Okay.